Before I introduce our next session, which I'm very, very excited about because personally, when I was in the industry, I've been in two of these seats as an industry professional back in my days. So I haven't done the third one yet, but at least on the owner and contractor, I can sort of correlate with what we had discussed when we were putting this panel together. But before we do that, again, we tried something different with our sponsorships, and this year we have VIP level sponsorships. We just want to thank you, our first VIP level sponsorship. I believe it's Adams & Rees LLP. So thank you again for getting a VIP table and for being here with us. So anything you want to share for maybe 10, 15 seconds quickly, you're more than welcome to.
Morning, everybody. Benjamin Rachelson from Adams & Rees. Have the pleasure of representing Hogan Construction Group. We're the attorneys on panel 3 who hopefully you don't hear from too often, but we are certainly here today. If you have any questions, pick our brains, a little free legal advice, and happy to help whenever. So.
Thank you again, you guys. Okay, so like I said, I think Ken did a wonderful job of sort of laying out what we're going to be covering for the day. And we have sort of different perspectives on the concept of construction risk. So we're really gonna, when I think of anything, it's always an upside down funnel. So we're gonna start with broad and then make our way down to some of the specifics, and that's how the panels are laid out. So our first panel, I'm very excited to have these amazing folks up on stage, and I'll introduce them in just a second. But the first one is really focused on business and project risk. And the reason why this panel was put together is really to understand how different parties and different stakeholders think about a business or a construction project. So we have an owner representative, we have a contractor representative, and an architect representative. So we have all three on the chair. So with that, let me introduce our first panel, whose name is Bruce Collins from Roseman Holdings. Bruce, raise your hand so they know who's Bruce. Perfect. Oh, I got to do. There we go. Perfect. And you guys said exactly the opposite of what the slides say, isn't it? So you might have to go upside down. That's just yeah, it's perfect for you guys. So look at that. Next, we have Mike Burnett from Holder. Thank you, Mike, for being here. And I'll have them share a little bit about their background before answering the first question. And last but not the least, we have Joe Alcock from Macmillan, Pasden & Smith. So three excellent companies. And maybe I'll give you guys 30 seconds to introduce yourself, just so they can get familiar with your experience and what you work on and what are the kinds of things that you do in your current role. So, Joe, we'll start with you.
Sure. Just want to say thank you for having me here and talking today, and hopefully helping you guys understand architecture a little bit, our practice. So I'm Joe Alcock. I'm a principal with Macmillan Pasden Smith. I'm the director of our Atlanta office, and I also lead our living practice, which deals with multifamily, senior living, student housing, affordable housing projects. Spend a lot of time with developers. I also collaborate with our team in Atlanta on higher ed and civic projects, so the public sector work and that. But we're a 8-office firm, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, about 300 people, and we do a lot of different projects. So probably have worked with many of you, maybe not me personally, but several of our staff. So thank you all for having us here today.
Thank you, Joe. Mike?
Yeah, thanks as well for having us here. My name is Mike Burnett. I'm a senior vice president with Holder Construction. Been with the firm about 28 years. We do $6 billion a year in annual revenue, 6 or 7 core markets, offices across the United States, and look forward to having a good discussion today.
Bruce?
Bruce Collins, thanks again for having me and allowing me to be up here with you guys. So in the hospitality industry, I've been in the hospitality industry my entire career in the upstate, but have had the opportunity to work all over the U.S., nothing international. Don't know if I want to go there yet. But yeah, I'm a Clemson grad way back. I don't want to tell how old I am. My son and his friends are in the program now, so have a vested interest all the way around.
No, thank you again. And before we start the panel, and this is not me asking questions. I mean, I'm going to introduce the topic and ask a few questions, and then we're going to flip the whole session and have you all ask any questions you may have. I mean, I have a list of 25 questions I can just go through, but we don't want to do that. And I'm sure you guys have questions and you have things that you want to know from all three stakeholders together, so we'll flip that in about 10, 15 minutes. But just to get the session started, and I guess we'll start with, Joe, before we get into the risk, right, I think one of the big deals in the construction industry is the term success. I think that we're all after, hey, we want to have a successful construction project. We want to be successful at the end. So, just starting this off, what are your key goals when it comes to construction projects on your end? Basically, what would you say leaves you happy and satisfied at the end of a project? And that goes for all three of you, but we'll start with you, Joe.
Sure. I think we all wake up in the morning and think about what are we going to do today and what's ahead of us. And I always say what I want to have at the end of this career is a good story. I want to have good stories to tell. I want to work with people I enjoy working with. So I think the first thing that we really try to understand is this going to be a project that's going to be enjoyable? Is it going to be something we're going to be proud of? Is it going to help us grow and learn as individuals? And I think that's really the factors that define success for us. It's is the owner going to be happy? Are we going to enjoy working with them? Is the contractor going to do a good job? Are we going to enjoy working with them? And at the end of the day, are we going to have a good story to share in the world that we did something positive? That's really the way I define success. Of course, money and energy and resources and all of that come into that, but that's really how we define success.
Mike?
Yeah, I think as a general contractor, your most precious resource is your people, your staff, and you've got limited numbers there, so you want to deploy them on projects that you feel can be successful. So that's a lens that we really look at every opportunity through. And what does that mean? Well, does that owner, does that client have a track record of success, of treating its partners fairly? Is the program and budget aligned? If you've got a budget that's way out of whack and you can kind of see it, obviously that's going to, not to say you stay away from it, but you got to know going in that's going to be a big challenge. But at the end of the day, for us, for all of us, I think it's a reputation business. You're not seeing commercials about GCs and architects, and so we have to deliver. And so we're looking through the lens of, can this project be successful? And, once it sort of, passes that test, it becomes an opportunity that we get interested in. I think another key aspect of it is competency. Are we core competent in that particular, project and product type? Again, if you, not to say you can't venture out, you got to be very thoughtful and smart about how you do it. But I think, having competency to be successful is important.
Budget, schedule. Budget, schedule. No, I'm just kidding. So
You're
as an
the owner,
owner,
right?
that's something that is ingrained in you on every project. The MRAD students, budget and schedule, right? So that's, every owner's making their decisions based on those items, and that's just the fact of it, right? Beyond that, it's all about relationships, right? It's being able to look at a project and finish it as a group, finish it well as a team, be able to have a great experience, somebody said earlier, and roll that to the next project. I think owners get sometimes sidetracked with, the pro forma and the background and what all that means. But I think, across the board, when it's a successful project and things we're looking for is how can we manage all that together? How can we look at all the big picture together? Not just me, but the entire team, on how we can achieve everybody's goals together and look back and say, you're always going to look back at a project and say, that wasn't such a good idea. There's something in there that you're going to look at and say, maybe we won't do that again. But at the end of a project, to be able to look at it holistically and say, we were successful, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, everybody made money, that's the key.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's interesting because, we all know that, the industry thinks in terms of cost, schedule, and quality. And so it all seems like sometimes we almost misunderstand that, the contractor's after higher costs, and I'm trying to minimize costs. But from what you're saying, it seems like we're all after the same goal, is minimize cost, increase quality, and try to stay on schedule. So I think that's a good lesson for all of us is we're all after the same goal, right? We're not trying to go after different achievements, we're after the same goal. So again, thank you. So based off of that, right, I mean, knowing the goals of the project, really getting to the risk portion of it, what are some of the most common risk, that you encounter, within your role as the owner, contractor, and architect? So maybe top 3 risks that you see, man. Every project I look at, these are the 3 things from my perspective that sort of keep coming up. Anything you want to share on that? Maybe we'll
Sure.
start with you.
It's oddly enough, Mike and I were just having that discussion before we jumped up here, but clarity of scope, right? Who is doing what? Everybody's expectations being aligned, right? So as an owner, I have to understand from the design team and the general contractor and everybody else that's included, how they're viewing this, right? And that what I'm putting forth ideas that the design team is executing on, that the GC is executing on, that goes all the way down through the subs and everybody else, that everybody really understands what the end game is. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here, and how can we make that better, which means we're going to be more successful.
Yeah, I'll preface some of my comments here with, really all of our work is collaborative delivery, so it's CM at risk, progressive design build. So I'll preface that a little bit. Not to say that the comments aren't applicable, but it's just a lens to look at it through. I think in that regard, we're often delivering GMPs to our clients. One of the biggest risks that we have is a GMP overrun. So how do you protect against that? Well, we've got to make sure we're coordinating the scope, that it's all coordinated across the trade packages, that we have contingency that allows room and a margin of error. You have to manage that contingency well, but that cost risk is one that, as a general contractor in collaborative delivery, you sort of always have that anxiety, over you of making sure you deliver in that regard. Schedule risk goes without saying. All of our GMPs are going to have a date certain. Often there's milestones within there. Contracts often have liquidated damages requirements, so you've got to stay on schedule working with our trade partners. And then probably should have said this first, but the other big risk is safety. On a lot of these bigger projects, you've got hundreds and in some cases thousands of workers, and allowing them to go home safely at the end of every day is priority number 1, and that is not an easy task. So establishing a safety culture that is going to produce metrics of success in that regard, those are probably the top 3 that I see. And all of that embodied by the contract risk, right?
So I guess at the beginning of a project, when I'm thinking about what's the risk of us being involved in that, I think I kind of break it down into 3 or 4 categories. One is, can our team deliver? Do we have the talent, skill, knowledge, experience to deliver? Nobody wants to get involved in a project that's over their head and they're constantly struggling and sweating, and that's how you burn out staff and wear out people and frustrate owners and contractors and make it an unpleasant experience to deliver that project. The second thing I think we need to think about is, as a company, we have a responsibility to our employees to make money so that they can earn a living and pay wages and all those technology things that we want to create as our company. So can we make money doing this project? Now, there's different levels of projects. We've worked with some nonprofits and broken even on those, and we work with some institutions that are well capitalized, and those have been financially great projects. So is there a profit in it? Is there a financial reward to it? The third, I think, is really the reputation. We want to do work that builds our reputation on our skills and knowledge. We want to know how to elevate what we do, put those things into the community in a good way, show others that we have that reputation, that we can deliver on time and on budget to our owners and our contractors. That's what keeps work coming back and those good experiences coming our way. And so those are really important. And I think I would say the fourth is really kind of an umbrella to those three. Do we have the passion to execute that project? Because if you don't show up in the morning and say, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm focused on, you're not going to deliver your best work. You're not going to deliver your best efforts in that. So to me, that's kind of an umbrella. I can overcome my some of my skills and talents by being passionate and curious and figure things out. I can be clever and in a good way and thoughtful and make the project profitable. I can learn how to turn even a bad project into a good story. But if you're not passionate about any of those, you won't succeed on those things.
Awesome, and I know, that's really good. I know you guys hinted a little bit, but, so some of the risks you've identified, how do you mitigate some of those? Any strategies or anything you guys come up when it comes to reputation, cost, schedule? What are some of the things you might recommend to mitigate some of those risks if they were to come up? Mike?
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit on the cost side. We work with our owners to agree on, appropriate contingencies for projects, as you're delivering a GMP. And so CMR, as the GC, we're often going to have construction contingency part of the contract that, allows to have sort of a buffer to, exposing fee for issues that might come up. In progressive design build, we often have, in addition to that construction contingency, a design contingency. So those are some of the strategies to mitigate cost. I'll say it's also really important that the contract is clear on acceptable uses of those contingencies, and working with our clients on the front end, that the more clear you can make that, the smoother the project's going to go by sort of having pre-agreed to usages of the contingency. On the schedule side, actually similar approach. The project should have a weather contingency in the schedule. Put a bar at the end, you use a day, you take a day out. We also obviously have strategies with our subcontractors where, you want to try to set yourself up for success and have durations that, that we're confident have some room for error to work within our overall schedule to the client. So again, similar approach, contingency, and again, in both those cases, what you don't use returns back to the client, either through lowering cost or earlier project delivery. And then safety just comes 100% down to culture, safety program culture, and leadership, driving safety behaviors.
Joe?
Sure. I'm going to say I'm a bit of a fan of the CM at risk delivery. I've delivered a lot of projects in the design bid build world, and the night before the envelope opening, they usually don't sleep very well. And the design build world, has pluses and minuses too. But I think delivery method is one of the ways you think about is this a way of managing risk? I think understanding the client, sophistication, the owner, do they understand what they're asking for? Can they afford what they're doing? Is this a project that's in their realm and knowledge? I think, are we partnered? And I say, to me, like the bigger risk projects, I really think should be a CM at risk, because there's a lot of variables that need to be managed along the way, and I think having the full team at the table while you're managing those variables or those risks is really important. But understanding a good team and really knowing how to communicate. I think if the communication breaks down between the owner, the contractor, and the architect, projects can go south really fast. And so I would say communication is really probably the best way. And I think Ken said it earlier, bad news does not get better with age. Own it early, own it fast. It usually gives you more time to recover and solve those problems. So stand up. I know the lawyers don't always want you to do this, but sometimes you are going to make mistakes, and own them, and actively work to solve them. And I think owners and contractors will respect that.
Bruce, from the owner's perspective?
I'm gonna second, third, and fourth, communication. Communication's the key. I mean, you know, everybody has to understand the end game. Everybody's got to understand how all the team members are approaching it. So I think communication and partnership going into these projects, you know, nothing's easy today, and there's challenges with drawings and everybody working in their bubble. And I joke, I spend half my time popping bubbles so everybody will come together, and I force that, right? So I you know, having that communication from day one, when you have your team established, we're going to talk every week, and you're probably going to get tired of talking to me, and I have to be a nosy owner because I have to be in it. The days of an owner handing you a project and saying, call me when you're done, that's the worst recipe for disaster, right? I mean, because nobody understands expectations. Nobody knows where it's going to end up. So that communication from day one, I mean, it's not always going to be rosy, right? I mean, there are going to be tough discussions, tough decisions, you know, compromise. Everybody's going to have to figure out where to meet in the middle. But as long as you're talking about it and you're staying engaged and you're working as a partnership group, then I think you have a lot more chance for success. The projects that I've been successful in, the team got along great. I did the AC Hotel in downtown Spartanburg. Very difficult project. Looks like an old hotel that's a brand new hotel. It was crazy. That superintendent and I became great friends, and that was 2017. We're still great friends today, and we're going to do something this weekend. It's because, you know, when we got into the nitty-gritty, we all realized, you know what, however bad I want this to be finished on time and on schedule, at the end of the day, if I'm not in there working with you to help solve problems, to come up with solutions, communicating through all that, and being a team member and not trying to just, you know, shove something down somebody's throat, that's how it's all going to end on a good note.
All right, thank you. And really, and you know, to really, Mike, to your point, I think you mentioned subcontractors. So really, I think, you know, looking at construction project, it's so critical that your subcontractor culture, you know, as a general contractor that you hire, are focused on that risk aspect of it. So I mean, anything that you do to, you know, make sure that, hey, yeah, they are planning for risk, they understand what is risk, and what are some of the, maybe in the selection process, what are some of the things you do on the subcontractor side that you will look at that, yeah, they understand risk on the project and they have actually accounted or at least thought about it.
Right, yeah. So I spend a lot of time in our aviation market space, and a lot of our owner contracts really require a procurement plan, a formalized, you know, process by which the general contractor is going to go about procuring the trade contractors. And as part of that, we do a pre-qualification process. As part of that, you know, we want to know, have you worked on an airport project before? Which ones? So really spending some time understanding the experience of the trade contractors, and then getting down to the individual person. We interview them. We want to know, you know, okay, who's your project manager and superintendent going to be, and do they have similar, you know, aviation experience? So, you know, we can't do what we do without our trade partners, and so their selection is really important. We also work with our clients that it's not necessarily low gets a job. You know, it's a comprehensive review of price, of people, of schedule, of, you know, holistic response. And, you know, that I think has been a big part of allowing us to select the right trade partners to help us be successful.
So I think what I'm learning is don't select based on price only. You know, it's interesting, you know, being a, you know, researcher that I am, you know, in the industry, I actually ran some tests myself, and, you know, not anyone knowing that I was doing it, to really see, you know, looking at over 100 RFPs and, you know, looking at the project completion and really track, like, what's the key measures of success, you know, that we see. And sure or not, it was the vendors who can actually plan for risk came up at the very top. It's like their ability to see the project from beginning to the end and to see how it's going to go and to understand what are the things that can cause and how do I plan for that in the planning phases. So very interesting that, coincides with what, I actually found out. So again, thank you for that answer. I know we're about halfway in. It's 11:15. We have about 25 minutes. I did want to give an audience to ask any questions you may have. Again, we have owner, contractor, and the architect. So this is your chance to ask any questions that you may have. So I know we have folks with microphones, and if you have a question, raise your hand and they'll come run to you, because I do want to give an opportunity to ask questions to these panelists we have on stage today. So any questions from the audience? Oh. Stole all the mics.
Hello. My name is Zaki, and I'm CSM student. So I know Mike talked about elements of risk and selecting trade partners. So I'm thinking about, how about GC doing self-perform work? Is it a risk or is it an opportunity? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that obviously varies by general contractor. I can speak to our side of the business and how we look at it. Our competency in self-perform work is really limited to concrete. That's where we have some expertise and talent. And so then it kind of goes back to the client and the owner agreement. We have some owner agreements who don't want their GC self-performing, and the contract will go so far as to say that. We have other projects where we can self-perform, but we have to submit a proposal to the owner with the competing subcontractors, and in some cases a day before they submit. And then there's a collaborative scoping process. And so my experience is it's really highly dependent on the situation. I know we have competitors who may be way more strategic in their approach there and how they market that and how they approach it. And, I think ours is more of a business case, case by case. Does it make sense? Do we have the resources? Do we have, but for any general contractor, it can be financially, beneficial to do it. And I will tell you, I've seen a lot of instances where in a very busy market, the owner can benefit through that self-performance, because we've got a lot of cases where, the trade contracting marketplace wants more than what we would want as a GC to do the work. And you take something like concrete, and use the word self-perform. Well, we're not entirely self-performing. We're going out and getting pieces and parts. We got to get a rebar supplier. We got to get a rebar installer, and we assemble a package that can be highly competitive in the right situation. So that's the way we approach it. Hopefully that answers.
I was just going to add, you referenced the owner making some decisions in that. So from our standpoint, it is situational, right? I mean, it's all about evaluating that risk, right? Is the GC big enough to be able to self-perform that particular project in that situation and be successful, right? So it's transparency and communication, right? Walking through that and understanding those capabilities. And, maybe it is better for the GC to self-perform rather than go out to the subcontractor community in that situation. But from an owner standpoint, it's all about that transparency and communication, right? Talking through it, understanding how can we all execute this the best way together.
I'm going to piggyback with a follow-up question to that. How do you feel about owners self-performing? Some of them have World Trade Center, World Congress Center, and that is a group that's probably got pretty robust facilities guys that do some stuff and that. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, for me, it probably depends on what scope, right? They're self-performing. I'm aware there are some pretty significant projects right now. There's some in Atlanta, for example, where the developer is acting as the GC and providing project managers, superintendents, holding all the subcontracts. And, I think that may be a trend. I don't know. We'll see. There could be more or less of that, but I think we do see that from time to time. Obviously, that's totally up to the owner if they choose to go that direction. As far as individual pieces, I think it maybe depends on what the scope is. I think it comes right back down to communication. I mean, the owners are these are their projects. They certainly have the rights to do the work, and we want them to be successful. So it just comes down to making sure we're fully coordinated and that everybody's clear who's got to do what. Yeah.
I also think it just depends from an owner standpoint what that owner's sophistication is, right? So you have some owners that could probably do this no problem, but I would also say that's probably rare, right? I mean, I think in the new construction side, I think you're less likely to see a owner take that risk. I think in a existing larger facility standpoint where you're doing massive renovations and changes, maybe, but I don't know. From my standpoint, no, I don't want to deal with all that, right? I mean, that's the reason I hire you guys is I don't want to have to deal with all that stuff.
You know, I have to say something on this. I did that once, and the biggest risk as an owner hiring subcontractors to do the work was marriage risk on my part. So, I was basically an owner and a GC at one project, and I'm like, I'm never doing this again. So I was never home on weekends or doing things. So stick to your role, right? There's expertise in.
Yeah, as an owner, right? A jack of all trades, master of none.
Exactly.
I want to rely on the people who are experts in that field, right? So I don't know how to do that. So I want to have the right people on the team that can execute on that front.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, there's actually two. We'll go there and Mike will come to you.
Mike, you mentioned progressive design build, and there seems to be an uptick with that, and it's being mentioned a lot more often. And obviously, it caters to heavy civil and larger GC type work. I understand the advantages of it. What are some of the disadvantages from your perspective?
So I'd say, and it's not necessarily a disadvantage, the lift on the general contractor is greater, and I would also say for it to perform at the highest level, you need, a general contractor needs some different talent. What I mean by that is you better have a design manager. You gotta have someone on your team that is experienced and understands what support your design partner needs, not to manage them, but to make sure that we're speaking the same language, we understand each other's needs, and that we're coordinating, because for us in progressive design build, for the project to be successful, our design partners got to be successful. And so we need somebody on our team that's full-time focused on it. That's certainly one of them. I would say maybe the disadvantage that's out there, and boy, this could be a whole nother panel, and I'll maybe touch it just to make the point. And, when you talk about the standard of care for our design partners, right, they're a professional service. There is no expectation for perfection, but sometimes our clients have one. And there's a perception that any mistake your design partner makes is a PL insurance issue. And so a lot of times on our progressive design build, we have to work really hard on the front end to make sure our client understands, no, we cannot expect perfection. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be walls that are not labeled correctly on the fire rating. And we, as the progressive design builder, have to have a contingency so that there is a funding source to deal with the changes that come out of that. So it's not necessarily a disadvantage, but I'll say what I'm experiencing, I'm working on a $800 million progressive design build right now, is there is a lot of communication and understanding that needs to happen between the GC and the owner to make sure that the parties are on the same page. Because you start getting sideways in those, you start getting squirrely on trust, and that's the foundation of the whole project. So if we're not communicating and we don't trust each other, things can start to get real squirrely. So I would just say the fact that it's not as common of a delivery method in the industry right now, that there is not the same level of deep understanding of how it works. And the contracts aren't always written really well.
If your architect thinks he has perfect drawings, run away. That's
If you don't learn anything, that's the one you got to take away.
So again, an academic, we'd like to kind of wrap up this, bundle it together, and similar to OSHA has, its top 3 risk relative to safety. If you had to bundle this together, I know that on a specific project, like the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, that movable roof, very risky, right? But from a general standpoint, for projects, what would be your top 3 risks that we would tell students? Pay attention to cash flow, pay attention to the schedule, pay attention to, you name it.
I mean, they're sort of because I like some of the answers the team gave here, but there is sort of a grouping in that. There's the tactical, technical stuff, the stuff I mentioned earlier, costs. You need to have a cost projection. You need to have a schedule that you're actively progressing, right? All the sort of 101 blocking, tackling, I think, those are key project management risks, but what these guys hit on earlier, I think, when I look back at my career, a large part of the success is built on the people, the communication, leadership and stakeholder involvement and buy-in, the team. If you have a solid team, you have leadership around that team, the team is bought in and working together and making each other successful, the risk is if you don't have that. If you start getting silos, if you have leaderships, the owner is not engaged, the owner's not worried about having an efficient change management process, those things will absolutely spiral out of control and can become enormous risks that impact the other technical, tactical stuff, cost, schedule, et cetera. Anybody else?
I was going to say, I joke about budget schedule, right? But I think it was interesting. We had a big project in DC, and we sat down with a contractor, and we said they had I think we talked about this, a project, they called it a project success planning meeting. And so I'd never done one before as an owner's rep, and I'm picturing in my head, we're all going to, have lunch, sing Kumbaya, and what are we going to accomplish, right? But it was eye-opening to sit down and listen to every stakeholder in the project talk about what was important to them. And for me, it was time. I have to, as a hotel developer, we have all these pieces that have to come together to get that hotel operational. We have a very large staff we have to hire. And so if we're out there trying to hire a staff and we don't know when we're going to finish, that time will kill us. My boss would kill me for saying this, but I would rather pay a little more and risk my budget side a little bit to execute on the time, because even though I may pay the project team a little bit more to finish on time, it's going to help me because I can manage that whole opening process. And then as an owner, it's all about ringing the cash register, right? It's all about being able to put whatever your idea is into execution and hopefully churning some cash flow off of that so you can go do another one with the same team. But I'd say, with budget schedule, people has become just such a bigger and bigger risk component, managing people, managing their relationships. The days of a antagonistic owner-contractor relationship are over. They are gone. If anybody believes in that anymore, that, I used to joke, right? One of my old mentors would say, every general contractor, if their lips are moving, they're lying. And I'm like, well, how are we ever going to get anything accomplished if I go into a meeting? Yeah, I know, you probably met him. How are we going to get this done? It's all about that partnership. It's all about mitigating those, whatever the risks are. For me, it's all about time. It's all about managing the partnership of the team to have that same goal in mind and execute.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Mike, you stole my question. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm going to jump in. I don't necessarily have like top 3, but I would say something I think everyone in this room is going to struggle with is the speed of innovation. Ken said that we used to sit down and we'd look to the guys with the gray beards, and that was where we knew the knowledge was. But the technology is advancing so fast that I go in the room and I try to find the youngest person because they're the ones who've been playing around with the software for 2 days and have figured it out. And but I think there's a lack of experience and knowledge of that individual, but they've got all the buttons. They know how to press all the buttons. I don't know how to press any of the buttons, but I know what it needs to output be. The other thing I would say is, in the same vein, is our subcontractors are often the ones that are presenting the innovative building methodologies or innovations, and hey, this used to work like this, and now it's even better if you build with this, and we can do it faster, we can do it less expensive, higher quality. Why aren't you speccing this, Mr. Architect? I don't know anything about this technology. The only way we get exposed to some of that is sales reps come and knock on our door and say, hey, you need to use the latest and greatest fun thing. And as soon as we do that, we find out the contractor's like, yeah, we tried that 4 times, don't do it. And that. So the innovation is really, I think it's exponentially increasing. BIM models, we're trying to design these 3D models, and I used to say to my staff, like, it's 2D output. We're printing drawings. Just get the drawing to look right. I don't care what the model is. But every project these days, the contractor team wants our 3D model. And all of a sudden, is everything modeled right? Do we put the doors exactly right? I know the drawing printed right, but is the model right? Like, the output that is the contract document is right, but all of a sudden they're starting to build from this cloud thing that may or may not have been put together to produce that output exactly right. And that's when I think you can trip yourself up, and you can find some ways that get yourself in a bind and that. So I think this AI thing, I think it's a way of increasing productivity, but it's also maybe taking away a little bit of that responsibility and experience. Will it be great in the future? I'm sure it's going to be a tool that works well, but I think the innovation cycle, we all have to stay daily on top of learning and growing.
All right, so you brought up the Mercedes-Benz Stadium roof. Okay, so I got to share a quick story that ties back to, it's not just GC risk, it's owner, it's designer risk, okay? So for the owners in the room, when you've reached an agreement with your design team, is the contract clear what is delegated design and what is designed? Right? So we see a lot of instances where that's not clear. And nothing against our architect friends, but sometimes they run into situations and they're like, delegated design. So when we got the spec the first time on the roof, it said delegated design. The whole mechanization, the operable roof, so that was a very, stressful meeting, right, with the owner. Like, no, that's not a good idea, So that's just another, so it goes back to communication and understanding and alignment and collaboration. But delegated design is a big risk, I think, for all the parties, because sometimes our design team partners may get pushback and it's not in their fee. The owner thinks they've bought it, becomes an issue.
No, thank you again. I know we have about 10 minutes left, believe it or not. We're running through very quickly, which is great. But I did want to transition a little bit to the business side of things. I mean, we have heard that, economic, activity is sort of unpredictable. We have elections coming up, and there's, technology coming up. I mean, so as a business, how do you sort of prepare, sort of the business risk? Well, the risk is not going out of business, but how do you prepare yourself to sort of align yourself to what's happening, not like 5 years, but even like in the next 12 months, right? I mean, so what do you guys see from the business side of things that we need to be prepared for in terms of risk?
Hang on tight. No, I mean, it's interesting. So in the hotel business, if you've been in it long enough and you've built some, and it's a cyclical business, right? I mean, if you go back and look at history in the hospitality segment, it has increased over time, but within that, continuous historic increase, it's crazy. And you can go back and look at that. So I think, for us on our side as an owner, we're trying to always plan to weather the storm, right? Because at some point, we know there's going to be a bad day. and things are going to change. And so we need to be ready for that. We need to kind of expect that that's going to come at some point. You know, everything we're going through right now, it's probably as hard as it's ever been to do a project of any kind. You know, some are moving better than others, we talked about beforehand. I think it drives me nuts that we're all waiting for the election to see what happens, right? Every 4 years, we wait for the election happens, and we move forward. So it's like we've wasted months of anticipation for no reason, right? So I think on our side, it's, you know, the economic cycle is tough right now. Our opinion is it's going to improve. When is it going to improve is the question. You know, the rate cuts are important to us. You know, again, going back to our pro forma model, looking at interest rates and everything else has a big impact on the decisions we make. But, you know, it's also you know, you have to weigh the pros and cons, right? Is it better to move forward today and have a little bit of risk on that financial side? Or is it better to sit and wait and, you know, land cost, consultant costs, cost of capital, time is money is a real thing. So, you know, how do we fight all that? So I think for us, we're just always trying to figure out how we can be nimble, protect ourselves, and weather the storm.
So I'm going to share a story. In 2004, I started a small firm with a buddy of mine, and we were really good at multifamily, and we were cranking that stuff out. 5 years, we were booming. And around 2008, I was like, hey, you know, we're starting to grow. We should diversify a little bit. We've been a multifamily firm, and we took a risk and won a small little municipal project. And then the financial crunch came, and we were no longer a multifamily firm. We were a municipal civic firm with like 3 projects, and it got very tight and very quiet in that. And we ate a lot of peanut butter jelly sandwiches that year, and we focused on things. I will say I went through our insurance, and we changed all our insurance premiums and our levels of coverage, and I mean, we did everything to survive as a small little 5-person firm, and we did. We were smart, we were fiscally responsible, so we had reserves and that to weather that storm. But that was a very valuable lesson to me, and I would say, think about your work the way you think about your 401k. Diversify. Have things that help you grow and advance, have things that are going to be stable and return year over year, and maybe they're not making you rich or famous or building your company, but have a good base stable, and have some things that you're curious about that keep you engaged in those conversations, and really think about your work as a portfolio of different levels of risk. That's what I would strongly suggest.
Yeah, slight add-on to that, what is, I would say from a GC perspective, a strategic plan for diversification. So and that would be to diversify by product type and geography, or probably, there is no bulletproof answer, but those, I think, help you give the best opportunity for longevity. And the reason I say strategic is if you decide, well, let's diversify, let's go build industrial plants, you know, probably not the best strategy. That goes back to the core competency. And so I think a strategic plan that probably takes years to enact, but to try to get, you know, diversification by product type and by geography is for us has been what has helped during the really hard times. You know, that's the other thing to consider. A lot of our aviation projects, for example, are 3, 4, 5-year projects. Those provide a great bridge if, you know, you have a financial issue in the marketplace or the economy.
Excellent, thank you. And you know, I have one more question that is probably my favorite question that, you know, that I think is worthwhile is, speaking of that, you know, say you have a project, and it is a high-risk project. Is it hard to say no? That, you know, there's a good profit, good volume, but it's a very high risk. I mean, really, how do you convince yourself and your team that, hey, this is this might not be the one we might want to pursue here.
Yeah, sometimes the best decision is the project you passed on. It's tough. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline, especially in a really busy market. But I think as a general contractor, really any business, growing at an appropriate pace, don't outstretch your financial capacity. I mean, I see it with a lot of trade contractors. They're highly profitable, but they took on too much work too fast. They don't have the cash flow to handle the situation, so they start taking out letters of credit, and then you got an $8 million letter of credit, $12 million, and it gets out of control in a hurry. So, I think, being very tactful and honest with yourself and disciplined in the decision-making is really important to make good decisions from a business standpoint.
Sure. Bruce, anyone?
I was going to joke. One of my mentors used to say, the most important word in the English language, no. So, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, again, it's relationship and it's communication, right? I mean, as an owner, we joke, right? There's no project we don't like, right? I mean, we'll do anything. But the reality is you try, and sometimes it's just not a good decision. And you just have to go back to your past experiences and rely on those. And sometimes it's gut, sometimes it's, who knows. But, the last thing you want to do is go down the path that you're unsure about. Everything crumbles. You're putting yourself and everyone else on that team at risk for a bad situation. You just don't want to be responsible for that. So sometimes you just have to pull the plug.
Joe, from your end?
I think as architects, we want to be involved in everything, and often we get approached with a lot of flattery. You're the only person we know who can do this work, and we just have to have you on the team. And those are great words to hear, and certainly want to get on board. And our service mindset is really we want to help those clients succeed. I think it's really hard to walk away. I think it's really hard, and I think the first thing I probably do is like, okay, what happens if everything goes right? What is that story? And the second step is, what happens if everything goes wrong? And if you can't see both ends of those spectrums, because you're probably going to land somewhere in between, hopefully towards the top of that, but if you can't see what happens when everything goes wrong, and the catastrophic nature of that, then you're not being honest with yourself and your team, and you're going to lead yourself into some bad situations. So I think that's kind of how I approach it. Is I really try to be an optimist all the time, and I'm always excited about new opportunities and that. And we often think, oh well, we can avoid that problem and avoid this problem and and there's probably 20 problems you're not seeing. And if you're not recognizing that at the beginning of a project, you're really putting yourself in a place of risk. And as Mike said, I think some of the best decisions I've made have been, we might not be the right people for you on this project, and we wish you luck, but it's not a risk we can afford to take.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was great. That's one of the hardest ones, is saying no, right? I mean, it's of course I don't say no to my wife, but it's a good word outside of that.
It's a whole lot easier in an environment where there's a lot of work out there and there's a lot of other opportunity. It's another story when you're, the economy's in the bottom and you haven't won a job in 6 months, and you're like, I'm going to sign up for this. This is a bad idea, but I'm going to sign up for it anyway. And that's really when it's tough.
Yeah, I think, to your point, just to sum it up, it's like, diversify, but to an extent, but know your capability and know your cash flow, right? And, so no matter what happens, you're sort of in the line. So great. We're almost out of time, but I did want to give one more opportunity to the audience to ask any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Brian Bell with Frampton. This goes back more to project-specific risk. But what are some best practices GCs can employ to allow the design team to operate at an efficient level and also mitigate some of that constructability risk.
Mike, that's all you.
Just making sure. Yeah. So I think regardless of delivery method, you know, whether it's CMR, design build, obviously design bid build's a little bit different story. But in a collaborative delivery, whether we hold the design contract or not, the integration of those two teams together, drawing reviews, page turns, over-the-shoulder reviews. We've had a lot of projects where like we just go spend time at the design team's office, look over the shoulder, focus on constructability. You know, sometimes there's a lot of industry misunderstandings of exactly what that means, what is constructability, right? But getting in alignment on that and doing focus plan reviews, working together, talking with your partner about, you know, what are the issues or struggles that you have. One of the philosophies that I've seen, it'd be interesting to see if you agree with this, is that generally some of the details that are less progressed or aren't showing up yet are the more difficult ones. And so, you know, look for areas of the project that, you know, maybe it's not quite thought through all the way, and it may be because they need help figuring out what to do there. Is it a one-sided wall or a two-sided wall, you know? Yeah.
We just stick a note in there that says, GC figure out.
Means and methods? Yeah.
Means and methods here.
Yeah. Hopefully that gives a little
would say
context.
that's-
But
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. We struggle with exactly how to put it together, and that's a good way of finding the weaknesses.
I think we have time for one last question before our stomach starts grumbling here. Yes, ma'am?
Hey, I'm Mark Harrison from the MRED program, and Joe touched on turning a bad project into a good story, and I thought it might be a fun to end on a story with a lesson from each. Joe's example was the AC Hotel in Spartanburg.
Wow. Unfortunately, there are a handful. You know, I'll use it as an example again. We ended well on the AC Marriott in downtown Spartanburg. There are things in that project that are ingrained into my brain that I will never forget. Over 250,000 brick, 3,000 pieces of cast stone, real cast stone. We could have done his GFRC. I don't know why we did it that way, but when in the midst of that project, there was a moment where it was like, this is a disaster. I don't know how we're going to get this done. You know, we had a design architect that was operating in a bubble. McMillan Pazin was our architect of record, and they couldn't get answers. The GC is, you know, pounding on my door every day saying, hey, if you want this to move forward, we've got to get answers. So it was kind of a bit of a revelation where it was like the relationship in a team. It was like, hey, we're all in this together, right? I mean, McMillan doesn't want this to be a bad design project for them. GC happened to be Robbins and Morton. Robbins and Morton doesn't want an unsuccessful project. They want to make everybody happy. I'm trying to keep stakeholders happy. And so it was kind of like one day on one of the calls, it was like, look, guys, we're all in this together. And whether we like it or not, this is where we are. So we can either embrace it and work as a team and figure this out, or it's going to be ugly for everybody. It was still a struggle to get done. A lot of changes on the fly, ownership expectations, coordinating with the municipality, the brand. We had a party on the roof in the middle of a construction project, which was insane. But we did it because everybody, at that point, everybody was saying, you know what, we're going to do whatever it takes to make this successful. We still have to manage the budget. We still have to manage our schedule. But it means that, you know, if the plumber's got to be in the mechanical room at 6 o'clock at night, actually with an iPad looking at a 3D model to understand how everybody else's work comes together, guess what? Everybody did it. And I'd say from the owner's perspective, one of the things that helped, back to the subcontractor question, everything was transparent. I had zero secrets on that job. So, you know, everybody knew the where, the why, the how. I'm a big believer in the why. People hate me because I continually say why. Design, construction, it's like, why are you doing it this way? Why did we design it this way? Why are we doing it this way? But at the end of the day, because of all those relationships, because everybody stepped up and said, we're gonna figure it out, we all stepped back and look. You know, it was a long time ago for me, and now my nervous twitch has gone away. I can go enjoy that building. But, you know, standing on the sidewalk one day with somebody who had never been to Spartanburg before, and they were like, wow, that's a cool building. What was it before it was a hotel? And in that moment, it was like, that's the great story, right? It was a complete success. You know, you know, my head swelled, 9 miles, and said, you know what? It wasn't anything before. We designed it to look like an old hotel. We built it to look like an old hotel. And the fact that you think it is an old hotel, we won.
Yeah, I mean, probably one that stands out to me would be, we had a $1 billion project where it was fast-track construction, and design team was having trouble keeping up, and significant schedule and cost ramifications on the line, and the letters started firing between, the owner and the architect, and you can see they're digging the foxholes, and so we're kind of in the middle going, this isn't good. So you have this moment where you realize, all right, what do? The team has to succeed together. If one party's, not, it's going to be challenging. So we had this moment where we realized we were absolutely in this thing together. Go spend time with the owner. What's really upsetting you? What's really bothering you? Go spend time with the architect. What's really bothering you? What's upsetting you? Share the information, get the two parties talking, get the letters to calm down. Hey, Joe, we would like to have had the structural drawings on this date, but can you give us levels 1 and 2 on this date? And then let's do level, So you as a GC, you have to find solutions to help mitigate those situations and not just be an active participant. That's probably the biggest thing for me, and I think we've had a lot of instances where the design partners did the same for us. And so working together, one team, one objective, one goal.
Joe, any last?
I get to close it out. Okay.
Close it
They
out.
gave me plenty of time to think. It was perfect. Thank you, guys. So one of my favorite projects of all time is actually a pretty small scale library project. It's about 6,500 square feet, so not much bigger than a single family home. We were working with Fulton County on this project, and we had to meet a lot with the community, and they were very invested. So this project happens to be by the Atlanta airport in a town called Hapeville. And we developed this concept. It was a design, build, delivery, by the way, so we were working for the general contractor. We had to develop this concept for this new library, and we embraced the whole idea of how the city actually became a city because of the airport. And a lot of their patrons worked for the airport, worked for Chick-fil-A, which is originally right there, and Delta, and some of the other industries that are right there. So we really started integrating this into the project, and our construction team was part of that as well, all those discussions, and we created a great little concept. And what we found is as the project went along and hit these hiccups, everybody knew this theme. And so when they came to the table for a solution, they were like, hey, we got this problem, but I think we can make it better, because we can make it look like an airplane wing, or we can make it look like we didn't make any chicken sandwich things, but something that brought the color of Delta into it, or just added one more little thing that actually solved the problem in a way that wasn't just a technical solution. It was an enhancement to the theme. And so it was really, to me, it was really wonderful. At the end of that project, everybody, that whole team walked around and like, hey, we had this problem here, but look what we did. It wasn't just like, hey, don't look at that, we fixed it and nobody knows. It was like, we had this problem and we solved it real creatively. And those answers came from everybody on the team. It came from our our youngest design staff, it came from our superintendents, it came from our construction project managers, and even our senior design team. So at the end of the day, it's a small little jewel box. I'd encourage you, if you ever find yourself heading towards the airport in Atlanta and have a little bit of time, go look at it. It's a fun project, and it really came together well, and I think it's something that the entire team, including the owner, are all very proud of to this day. So.
Yeah, thank you again, Joe. Give these guys a round of applause. Thank you again for